Just wait until the bridal shower checks clear next Tuesday, the text read. I'll call off the wedding, we split the cash, and Julian is stuck with the $45,000 in cancellation fees since his name is on all the contracts. Julian stared at the glowing screen of his fiancée's iPad on the kitchen counter. He didn't yell. He didn't wake Vanessa up. He just quietly took a screenshot, sent it to his own phone, and permanently deleted the notification from her device. If the audience keeps watching, they will witness a manipulative fiancé and her greedy family realize they have been completely outsmarted, legally boxed in, and publicly humiliated by the man they thought they were scamming. 2 weeks earlier, the manipulation had been flawlessly executed over Sunday brunch. Vanessa had spread the vendor contracts across Julian's dining table, sighing deeply as she tapped her manicured nails against the expensive parchment. "Babe, I was looking at the venue agreement for the grand estate," she said, pouting slightly. "They need a primary signature. My credit score is still recovering from that student loan mess, and they want a guarantor. You have the 800 score." Julian hesitated, looking at the $15,000 deposit requirement. "Shouldn't we both be on it?" Vanessa laughed, a dismissive, patronizing sound. She patted his cheek. "Julian, you're the stable one. You're so much better at the boring paperwork than I am. Plus, my parents are wiring their $25,000 gift into our joint wedding fund tomorrow. I'll manage the cash, you manage the signatures. We're a team." She made him sign for the catering. She made him sign for the 12-piece band. She made him sign for the custom floral arrangements. By Friday, Vanessa was the sole manager of a joint checking account holding over $38,000. By Tuesday, she planned to drain it, leave Julian with the non-refundable debts, and run off with her ex-boyfriend, Greg. She thought Julian was just a useful idiot. She didn't know Julian spent his Friday morning sitting in the downtown office of a contract attorney. Julian didn't confront Vanessa. Confrontation was just noise. Julian wanted absolute control, because Vanessa had insisted Julian be the sole signatory on every single contract for credit purposes. She had legally completely removed herself from having any authority over the event. Julian called the grand estate. He called the caterer. He called the florist. He didn't cancel. Canceling would trigger the penalty clauses immediately. Instead, he invoked a standard modification clause, legally suspending all services under a financial scope review. Then, he went to the bank. As a 50% owner of the joint wedding fund, Julian had the legal right to move the money. He wired the entire $38,000 balance into an ironclad legal escrow account managed by his attorney. The stipulations were simple. Not a single dollar could be withdrawn, refunded, or moved without Julian's physical signature in the presence of a notary. But the trap was almost blown. Saturday afternoon, Julian was standing in his kitchen when his phone buzzed. It was his attorney's office, needing verbal confirmation to finalize the escrow lock. "Yes, proceed with the transfer," Julian said quietly into the receiver. "Proceed with what transfer?" Julian froze. Vanessa was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. His heart hammered against his ribs. If she checked the app right now, the money would be gone, and she would instantly pull the plug before his legal shield was fully in place. Julian didn't miss a beat. He turned around, offering a relaxed smile. "The floral deposit," Julian lied smoothly. "The vendor said the wire didn't clear, so I had the bank manually push the transfer. You know how boring the paperwork is." Vanessa's suspicious gaze held for a second before she rolled her eyes and turned back toward the hallway. "Just make sure it's handled." "I don't want cheap flowers." Julian let out a slow, silent breath. The invisible concrete wall around the wedding was fully built. Tuesday evening arrived. Vanessa walked into the living room, her eyes perfectly welling up with rehearsed tears. "Julian," she whispered, sitting on the edge of the sofa. "I'm so sorry, I've been doing a lot of soul-searching, and I can't go through with this, I need to find myself." She waited for the begging. She waited for the shock. She waited for the emotional breakdown. Julian just looked at her, his expression entirely flat. "Okay," Julian said. Vanessa blinked, her fake crying stalling out. "Okay, you're not going to try to stop me. If you don't want to get married, we won't get married," Julian replied softly. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked toward the door. "I'll stay at a hotel tonight. You have until tomorrow to pack your things." The moment the front door clicked shut, Vanessa's tears vanished. She pulled out her phone, a smirk spreading across her face. It was time for her payout. She opened her banking app, navigating to the joint wedding fund to transfer the $38,000 into her private account before leaving to meet Greg. The screen loaded. Available balance, $0. Vanessa stopped breathing. She refreshed the app. She force-closed it and opened it again. Available balance, $0. Panic setting in, she immediately dialed the grand estate. If Julian had drained the cash, she could at least cancel the venue herself and have the $15,000 refundable deposit routed to her debit card. "Hi, this is Vanessa Mitchell," she said, her voice shaking. "I need to formally cancel my wedding and process the refund for the deposit." The coordinator paused. "I'm sorry, Ms. Mitchell. You aren't listed as an authorized party on this contract. Julian restructured the agreement last week. All refundable balances have already been routed to a third-party legal escrow. We cannot process any requests from you." Vanessa dropped her phone onto the hardwood floor. She had no wedding. She had no cash. And she was completely powerless. The real fallout didn't happen over a phone call. It happened 48 hours later, right in the middle of Julian's office lobby. Vanessa and her father, Mr. Mitchell, stormed past the receptionist. Mr. Mitchell's face was purple with entitled rage. He had spent the last 3 months bragging to his entire country club about the lavish, high-society wedding he was throwing. "Julian!" Mr. Mitchell roared, slamming his hand down on Julian's desk. "I don't know what kind of sick financial game you're playing, but my family deposited over $25,000 into that account. If there's no wedding, we expect a cashier's check today so we can at least throw a face-saving reception for our guests." Julian leaned back in his leather chair, steepled his fingers, and looked calmly at the two sweating, furious people in front of him. He opened his desk drawer, pulled out a thick manila folder, and slid it across the desk. "I completely understand, Mr. Mitchell," Julian said smoothly. "Unfortunately, because Vanessa chose to suddenly walk away, I was hit with $12,000 in immediate, non-refundable vendor penalties. Since the gifts were legally deposited into a joint account explicitly meant to fund the wedding, I used those joint funds to cover the damages your daughter caused." Vanessa went pale. "You used our money to pay off your contracts. You told me I was the numbers guy," Julian replied, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "What about the rest of it?" Mr. Mitchell demanded, grabbing the folder. There was nearly 30 grand left. "That is my money." "Actually, it was our money," Julian corrected. "And since those checks were written out to celebrate the union of two people in love, I felt it was only right to give the remaining balance to a good cause." Julian tapped the top document in the folder. Mr. Mitchell looked down. It was an official, tax-deductible receipt. "I donated the entire remaining balance to the National Coalition Against Fraud," Julian continued, holding Vanessa's terrified gaze. "And because I know how much you value family appearances, Mr. Mitchell. I made the $26,000 donation directly in the names of Vanessa and Greg." Mr. Mitchell frowned, his anger suddenly turning into utter confusion. He looked at the receipt, then slowly turned to his daughter. "Who the hell is Greg?" he asked. Vanessa physically shrank back, her mouth opening and closing silently. "You should ask your daughter," Julian said, turning his attention back to his computer monitor. "She's been doing a lot of soul-searching lately. Now, get out of my office before I have security remove you both." Julian didn't lose his credit score. He didn't lose his dignity. He didn't pay a single dollar for a wedding that was designed to ruin him. Vanessa was forced to move back into her parents' house, completely financially dependent on a family that was now the laughingstock of their country club. Greg, realizing there was no $38,000 payout coming and that Vanessa was completely broke, stopped answering her texts by the end of the week. That Friday evening, Julian sat on his balcony, poured himself a glass of expensive bourbon, and opened his banking app. He looked at the pristine zero balance on his credit card statement. For the first time in 6 months, he finally smiled.